Well, let's bring in our political panel today. Both, we're pleased to say, here in the studio. Labor MP for the seat of Boothby in Adelaide, Louise Miller-Frost, is back. Welcome,
Hi,
Louise. And Independent MP for the Sydney seat of Fowler, Di Lee, is here. Welcome back to you too, Di. Now, Louise, I understand you have already spoken on the Constitution Alteration Bill. You can summarise for us, I suppose, your key points. But just to pick up a question that arises from Scott Morrison, putting a circle around sporting codes and questioning whether it is appropriate for them to be taking a public position. Why is it appropriate?
Oh, look, I think sport is a very important part of our society. They are, to a large extent, membership-based organisations. We know that there has been a lot of issues with racism in a number of sporting codes that they've had to step up and deal with, and I think it's entirely appropriate for them to have a position. Perhaps it's not the position that the former Prime Minister is advocating, but I'd also sort of point out that during his government, they had two committees that actually looked at this particular proposal and recommended it, and recommended that a change to the Constitution was the only way forward. So for him to now go the other way is a bit of a surprise, and particularly when he says he doesn't have enough detail.
And how do you assess momentum in the campaign? I use that word loosely because I guess in a sense we haven't started, but as you look at polls, organisations, companies, political parties and the positions that they're taking up, is it a solid starting position for, in your case, the yes side of the argument?
Oh, look, it is hard to know, and obviously polls come and go. It is pleasing to see that we have not only the sports organisations but the faith-based organisations, major companies coming out and supporting The Voice. I certainly, when I'm out in my community, I have people ask about it from a whole range of positions. So some people are very strongly, yes, why haven't we done this before? Some don't know what it is, ask why a referendum, and some are no. And at the end of the day, we'll know when the referendum happens.
We will. And what about what you're picking up, Di? No doubt you are yourself preparing to deliver a speech as part of this alteration bill process, I imagine. But the feedback within your own community?
Look, I spent a lot of time on the ground, walking the streets of Fowler, meeting people and constituents, as I'm sure as Louise does as well. But from my community, no one has actually raised the issue and I've mentioned this before, Greg, the main issues people have raised is around, obviously, the cost of living with me. So it hasn't actually been an issue. And I think in Western Sydney, from Fowler across to, say, the area of Werriwa or next door neighbour, next electorate, it hasn't been an issue in our community.
Do you think that means members of the community are indifferent to it, or does it mean they're confused by it? How do you make sense of that lack of feedback?
I think they're not engaged with it. I don't think that's front and centre of their minds at the moment. What's more front and centre for them is the rising interest rates, grocery prices, and of course petrol prices. So those are in rent. And the rising rent. So that's the things that have come to my attention. And
I shouldn't assume that you're going to make a speech. Is it your intention to make a speech as part of this process?
No, because I don't think, it is, at the end of the day, I leave it up to the people to make up their minds about this, and whoever present a case, the government has to go out there and, of course, argue or advocate for their case. And, whatever information we receive, we'll send it to the community.
So is it your intention to remain personally undeclared about your position all the way through the voting day?
I will remain undeclared. I will leave it to the people to make the judgment at the end of the day. What they want to do is a referendum at the end of the day, and you have to have a yes case and a no case, and that's the people will make their minds up.
All right, at tone of debate, plenty of reason to question. I know we heard from the ASIO Director General in evidence to Senate estimates, Louise, yesterday. They're keeping a close eye on unintended consequences that come from this. Do you think there's more to come, or worse to come in many respects, about the raw and brutal side of some of these debates?
Yes, look, I have seen the Senate estimates, and it is very sad, but unfortunately not surprising that these things have come out, and we've seen them in news bulletins as well. It is quite possible that we will see more racist attacks coming out. I know in my home electorate we've had some unfortunate leaflets circulated which were entirely misinformation. Like they didn't even make reference to voice specifically, but entirely misinformation. We have the right in this society to live safely, no matter what our cultural background is. And it is really unfortunate that these things are happening. And I really don't think there is a place in our society for people who promote Holocaust denial.
No, everyone's calling for calm, and yet no one seems to have been able to douse that so far. Di, why don't I take you to Prime Minister Modi's visit to Australia? It created quite a spectacle last night at Homebush. Then I see today certain agreements have come out, as you would expect, around energy cooperation, visa arrangements, but also some sort of undertaking, according to the Indian Prime Minister, from Anthony Albanese, that he will take strict actions against Hindu versus Sikh conflict here in Australia. Do you assess that to be a problem in Sydney, attacks on temples and the like?
Look, we live in one of the most multicultural countries in the world, and in my electorate of Fowler, we've got, one of the most, I think is the multicultural centre in the country, and we have had people living side by side in harmony, despite the differences of cultures, religions, and faith. And I think that is something that we will actually, I don't believe, of course, we have received emails in regards to those issues, but I think in Australia, because we have been such a multicultural society, I think we can manage that well in terms of the differences. And we live, respecting differences is something that I believe, we're very good at. Yeah,
and it's been managed mostly up to this point. But like all MPs, you'd receive feedback on this, wouldn't you, from Sikh community members who are worried about this in Australia? Certainly in Melbourne, it's a big issue.
Yes, so of course I'm in Adelaide.
You're from Adelaide, but in Melbourne.
Yes, look, we absolutely have received emails. And look, I'd reflect on Di's comments and say we are a very peaceful society, and certainly in Boothby I've not seen or been made aware of any specific attacks. I think the majority of immigrants who come here really come here because they value our peaceful society and our democracy, and they value that and they respect it.
Yeah, hopefully there's some legacy from this visit that promotes that tolerance and understanding. And finally, work from home. I don't know if you saw the media reports. Yes. Commonwealth Bank, the NAB, and of course a long-running campaigner against it, Elon Musk, setting out expectations that maybe it's time people get back to their regular workplace. Is it in retreat, and should it be the work from home model?
Look, I think it's up to the employer and employee to bargain and negotiate in terms of working from home. But I do understand that organisations, there are certain roles and certain responsibilities that would required for you to be in the office, and that can be negotiated. And I think we are human beings and we are such a social animals, and we need to have that human interaction as well as collaboration. And I think while we can collaborate through Zoom and all of those technology that we have made available, I think it's more personal if we actually have this face-to-face interaction, because sometimes when I talk to you on Zoom,
it's not quite the same.
It's not quite the same. So I think that is very much at the end of the day up to the employer and the employee to work that out. But I think we need to understand that there's certain work environment that will require that face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, I mean, productivity will ultimately count for private enterprise, if not for the federal public service, I suppose.
Louise, public service as well, come on.
Of course. Has it run its course, though? Is the novelty factor of work from home waning?
Look, I don't think so. Obviously, when it first came out, particularly in the pandemic, it was something that it was really, we were forced into. You know, if you're going to work, you had no other option. Our legislation that went through earlier this year gave employees stronger bargaining rights around flexibility. But, there absolutely are some roles and some people who work better in the workplace. And I think it should be, and the way I've always managed workplaces is it is about productivity. And if you can be equally productive at home, then absolutely do it. But there are some roles that you can't, you can't be a nurse and phone it in from home.
You can't do that. And full disclosure, I'm terrible at working from home, so you'll always find me here. We're going to wrap it up there. Thanks to both of you, Di Lee, Louise Miller-Frost. Great to have you both here. Thanks so much.